Welcome to Game Plan. I'm Shivan Chanana. Whether it was the Alaska summit, which most analysts saw as a diplomatic triumph for Vladimir Putin, or the panic meeting of European leaders with Donald Trump, where Trump interrupted a schedule with 8 world leaders to make a call to the Russian president, and that call lasted 40 minutes. You can imagine the other 8 leaders during that time, what their predicament would have been. It seemed like a Putin-driven show all along. His shadow was cast far and wide in those dealings. If there is a peace agreement, will it be achieved now on Putin's terms, given the way things have been progressing? To discuss this further, I'm now being joined by Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, who's an international affairs analyst, author and historian. Dr. Doctorow, thanks so much for joining us here on Game Plan. The US president has now revealed that European allies are ready to put their soldiers on the ground to back Ukraine's security. What will the security guarantees look like going forward if we were to talk about the battlefield before we talk about anything else?
The security guarantees will look like nothing that you're hearing about on mainstream broadcasting today. This is all part of Mr. Trump's manipulation of his opponents, nominally his allies in Europe and domestically. You, in the introductory words, were speaking about Mr. Putin's victory, and you were very correct in pointing to the treatment that Mr. Trump gave to the visitors who were sent out of the room, who were told to leave and go to the Oval Office. Well, he had to.
All right, let's begin with what's happening on the battlefield first. Now, the US president has revealed that European allies are ready to put their soldiers on ground in Ukraine to back Ukraine's security. Now, what will these security guarantees look like? Dr. Doctorow, let's begin here.
They won't look like what is being reported. You have mentioned before that the meeting in Alaska was a great victory, was viewed as a great victory for Vladimir Putin. But let me take a different approach. I believe that the whole relationship is being directed by Mr. Trump. Most critics, including most observers, even in the independent media, as opposed to mainstream, have a very low estimation of Mr. Trump. They believe that he has no concentration powers, he has no reasoning ability on geopolitics, and so forth. I seriously disagree. I think he is showing mastership, of course not by himself. He has very capable assistants who are helping him in this, starting with Mr. Witkoff. But the end result is that Mr. Trump is running this show, not Mr. Putin, even though Mr. Putin is the one with the cards and Mr. Trump doesn't have too many cards. He's playing his limited hand very well. And we saw this in the way that he dismissed the European visitors during their attempt to persuade him to change his position on the Ukraine-Russia war these past few days. He sent them out of the room. He sent them to the Oval Office, and they waited 40 minutes while he had a conversation with his good friend, Vladimir. They understood that. The Russian commentary on this event on Russian state television yesterday was that this was the Obkom dealing with the Raikom. Put that Soviet jargon into contemporary American sports jargon. It was the major leagues and who were invited in the minor leagues. The Europeans were supplicants. The Europeans were beggars in Mr. Trump's White House. And that is clear. And the Russians, to my surprise, honestly, I am surprised, but the Russians, starting with Mr. Lavrov, their Minister of Foreign Affairs, have commented saying that they are satisfied, that they have good rapport with Mr. Trump, that he is working hard, and that he understands the root causes of the conflict and is trying to address them. That is a dramatic change.
Dr. Doctorow, that's an interesting perspective that you've brought. While a lot of analysts have seen it this way, this is a very fresh perspective that you are really pinning it on Trump's ability with limited cards to drive these negotiations in a manner. But if I were to now take the perspective of the Russian president, do you feel Putin would agree to concede or compromise in any which way? If yes, then what would he be willing to compromise here for a peace agreement?
Oh, he will be willing. he will be willing to compromise. It will be primarily on territorial issues, which are, from the Russian standpoint, secondary. Yes, the four oblasts in the eastern part of Ukraine, two of which are called Donbass, two of which are called Novaya Rossiya, they are, legally speaking, part of the Russian Federation. But Mr. Putin is a lawyer. He knows that laws can be changed. And by his own intervention, he can change that so that Russia would give up part of the provinces that it claims to be incorporated into the Russian Federation. This is the main area of compromise on territory. On the issues of NATO, no NATO, neutrality, no foreign troops stationed in Ukraine, no foreign military installations in Ukraine, there will be no compromise. I think Mr. Trump demonstrated his remarkable ability as a negotiator in this by stepping aside from the territorial issue and saying, you, Mr. Zelensky and Mr. Putin, will resolve that issue between yourselves without any foreign intervention in your negotiations. That was brilliant. That was essential. If indeed America dictated the terms, then you can be certain that it would meet with great animosity and resistance in Ukraine for generations to come. And that would threaten the peace. No, the Ukrainians themselves have to deal with Mr. Putin. He's right.
Dr. Doctorow, the way you've spoken about Putin, the way you've spoken about Donald Trump and his abilities to negotiate, just the fact that Zelensky 6 months ago had a completely different body language in the Oval Office, speaking in front of the US, in front of the entire US media, sitting next to the US president, and this time around, he was in the best possible suit that he could wear in the White House, and of course, saying thank you more than anything else. Even the map showing 20% of Ukraine with Russia, and the first thing that Zelensky said was thank you for that map, and I'm thinking about how to take it back. Now, whether he was talking about those areas or whether he was talking about the map, that there was no clarity on that. But talk to us about the land concessions. How real are those going to be in arriving at a peace agreement?
Well, we cannot be certain that they will arrive at a peace agreement. The critical stage now will be whether or not there is a face-to-face meeting between Putin and Zelensky. And that will take place, if it takes place, only because the Ukrainians will signal in advance that they accept to give up territorial concessions. There may be a discussion of whether they will be de jure or only de facto concessions, but that they will recognize Russian hold on these territories that it conquered. The tough question is, will they agree to give up the remaining part of Donbass? This is essentially the Donetsk Oblast, without a fight. That is stopping, withdrawing their troops as the Russians have demanded. That is an interesting question. I think that will help determine whether or not there is a meeting. There are other things that the Ukrainians can do that are much less painful for them, but would be an important concession to induce Mr. Putin to come to talks. And they were indicated clearly by Mr. Lavrov in his interview on Russian state television last night. He made reference to the human dimension, the language restrictions on Russian speakers in Ukraine. These are not just, you cannot teach in school using the Russian language. You cannot have any Russian media aired or distributed on the Ukrainian territory. You cannot conduct any official negotiations or business in Russian. Well, as Mr. Lavrov pointed out, this is in strict violation of United Nations definition on human rights. And I think it would be a very cheap and easy concession for Mr. Zelensky to induce the Russians to come to negotiate if he immediately revoked those illegal acts, which are at the root cause of the current war.
Interesting, you mentioned the root causes. Finally, I also wanted to get your thoughts on this, sir. Vladimir Putin had mentioned that the root causes need to be addressed and then we can have a way forward. And Russia expects that Europe will not resort to backdoor meetings and will not put a spanner in the works. If there is going to be a peace agreement, and before that, if there is that meeting between Putin and Zelensky, will peace now be achieved on Putin's terms?
Oh, yes. And why shouldn't it be? Why shouldn't the negotiations and the end document, whether a treaty or however it's called, be on Russia's terms? Normally, the end of a war is on the terms of the victor, not on the terms of the loser. And I don't think anyone doubts, including the most obdurate and stubborn people in Western Europe, that the Russians are the winners of this war. The issue here in the Russian demand that the Ukrainians will withdraw from the remain of Donetsk is that Russia will possess Donetsk, whatever the Ukrainians want or think, simply because it is moving daily against the main fortified towns. The Chasiv Yar fell a couple of weeks ago. The important city of Pokrovsk, which the Russians call Krasnoyarsk, is probably going to fall in the next week or two. And then there are only a couple of towns in the middle of Donetsk, or towards one third away from the Dnieper River, the Kramatorsk and Slovyansk, which remain, and they will be wiped out too in a matter of weeks or a couple of months. So what the Ukrainians can do now is save tens of thousands of lives among their soldiers, because the end result of their fighting will be the same as if they give it up now.
Dr. Gilbert, thanks so much for joining us here. And, your perspective has been very different from what most analysts have suggested so far. So thank you for that. And of course, you always back it up with facts from your own research. Given the fact that these peace talks are going to happen, you've also mentioned that the chances of, it's not a given that there is going to be a meeting between Putin and Zelensky. So one is only hoping that it may happen, because that has to be the next obvious step forward. And then that trilateral. And Europe is asking for a ceasefire. Trump said will be no ceasefire. He doesn't need that. So there are a lot of cracks which are emerging, which are already there. They're only widening in the Western front as well. But as far as Putin is concerned, there were all smiles from the Russian side, at least after the Alaska summit. Let's see how this one goes forward, and would love to have you on Game Plan again.
Well, thanks for having me.